And there we go. All right. Thank you, Jess. Hi, everyone. Appreciate y'all joining, whether you're here live or on the recording. So this is your official notice for those who are here that this is being recorded, just so we can continue to spread this education out into the ecosphere and get those comments in. So tonight, y'all are here to take an action. We're going to be writing comments about MVP Southgate, and we're going to be breaking down all of the information so you'll get the lowdown on what the project is, what these comments are about. We're going to take some time to write together and some more fun stuff. So before we move on, I'll take a time to just give thanks to all of our partners and collaborators in tonight's webinar. As you see on the bottom of the screen, we have POWHR, ARTivism Virginia, Appalachian Voices, and 7 Directions of Service here collaborating to give y'all the good information. And I think with that, we can go to the next slide. All right, here's a little more breakdown of our agenda for tonight. As I said, we're going to be starting with MVP Southgate, giving y'all, the context of what it is and talking a little bit more about this comment writing practice, which we then will practice after giving y'all some good talking points. So we're going to be supplying you with all the information and equipment, going through 2 different processes. That's one thing to note about tonight. You'll have the chance to actually do a little 2-for-1 and write 2 different comments, both about MVP Southgate, but for 2 different processes. So get your brains going, right? We're gonna have to just really, take this information and run with it. And I'm excited to be doing it with you. So those 2, we'll get into it, but we'll be going through FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee, and then VA, Virginia, the Department of Environmental Quality. So the 2 processes we're going to be focusing on. And then we'll have calls to action for moving forward, so you can keep doing the good work with us. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Leaf, who's going to take us away and let us know what MVP Southgate is.
Hi, and thank you so much for that. So to give you guys a brief history, Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate is a proposed extension of the MVP mainline. It was originally proposed in 2018 as a 75-mile methane gas pipeline. However, it has changed. It is now at 31 miles of a 30-inch diameter pipe, and it goes from Chatham County, Virginia, all the way into Rockingham County, North Carolina, which you can kind of see on the map there. In 2020, FERC granted its original certificate. However, construction never began because the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality twice denied MVP Southgate water permits, and the Virginia Air Pollution Control Board here in Virginia denied an air permit as well for its proposed Lambert compressor station, all due to environmental justice concerns. Now that it's back on the table again, I think it's really important to highlight that this pipeline would absolutely negatively impact the Dan River, which is still recovering from a coal ash spill. Right now, it's estimated about 3 million gallons of water for the testing, and there's a lot of potential for sedimentation, pollution from constructions, erosions. The company behind Mountain Valley Southgate has already, they're well known for having a lot of environmental violations, so it'd be nothing new. Next slide, please. And this is where we're at currently. So as I was kind of saying a little earlier, MVP has asked for an amendment to change the route, the diameter, and the capacity. This project is not what originally was proposed in 2018. It is significantly different. FERC's environmental assessment, which recently came out, fails to properly measure the impacts of Southgate, especially in terms of where Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate is co-located with other pipelines. There is not enough analysis or information about the cumulative impacts of multiple pipelines being constructed and placed in the same areas. And again, because this was originally proposed as a much different looking project in 2018, FERC is relying on an out-of-date assessment from 5 years ago. And the environment we're in just isn't the same. The pipeline's different. There's a lot of things that should be taken into factors. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, FERC released the EA, the environmental assessment, on the docket, and comments are due November 3rd at 5 p.m. Next slide. As we're writing our comments, thinking about what's useful, it's good to keep in mind we're asking them to deny the CPCN. We want to highlight the fact that cumulative impacts from Southgate and Williams Transco SSEP have not been properly analyzed and considered. And FERC itself has said that Southgate might not even be necessary. Not something that's really useful to highlight. And then yes, FERC absolutely should account for MVP mainline project having over 300 violations. And again, with all these pipeline projects proposed, FERC should absolutely be required to do a much more thorough programmatic environmental impact assessment. Next slide. And I think I'm passing it over to
me. Thanks, Lee. And thanks for explaining that FERC process as we are undergoing 2 comment periods for this project at the federal and state level. So as we ask the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to deny the amendment request, we also need to ask the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality to deny their permit, which is called a Virginia Water Protection Permit. That is the state level component of the Clean Water Act permit that is required. So simultaneous comment periods. The one for the Virginia portion of the project, which only talks about Pittsylvania County, Virginia, has comments due on December 5th by midnight that night. Some of the things we want to consider when commenting to the Virginia DEQ are what are the impacts to Virginia waterways. The agency has not considered cumulative impacts from the MVP Southgate and another similarly routed pipeline called the SSEP, which you'll hear about a little bit later. We know that the Southgate and its high number of crossings and areas of impact to Virginia streams and wetlands would be too burdensome on those water bodies. And as Leif mentioned, we know the developers have a history of water quality violations in Virginia in the hundreds and totaling millions in fines that were assessed for violations of water quality standards. So tonight we'll also take action to write the Virginia State Agency. I'll pass it now to, and I'm sorry I didn't say I'm Jess with Appalachian Voices, but I'll pass it now to Josh to talk about some of those cumulative impacts.
Thank you, Jess, my colleague from Appalachian Voices. I'm Josh Vanna with ARTivism Virginia. Yeah, these 2 pipelines are supposed to co-locate, at least for the majority of the round of MVP Southgate. And what we're looking at is, there's an established right-of-way with the Transco SSEP where it wants to add on to the existing right-of-way for the transcontinental pipeline. And that in many cases is 3 to 4 parallel underground pipelines running along the same path. So what is being failed to be considered here pretty frequently is that, you know, these projects aren't going to be happening in a vacuum separate from each other. If MVP Southgate is to be built or Transco SSEP is to be built, what will likely happen is that the right of way would be expanded in one direction or the other, maybe both. You're going to have to tear down trees. That's going to disrupt the integrity of the ground. We could have, like in so many hundreds of cases with the Mountain Valley Pipeline mainline project, even just normal weather events, heavy rains, normal rains can wash the construction mud and cause really disruptive and damaging sedimentation into nearby streams. This goes across wetlands. We've seen real damage to all sorts of different types of areas along the MVP main line in, you know, digging up the terrain and then installing through sometimes blasting or boring, trenching through waterways. You know, a large underground pipeline that is, you know, the size of a hula hoop or larger. We're not talking about your, you know, 8-inch, you know, mini line running to a few businesses on the edge of town. So, you know, in an extremely disruptive process, and both of these projects need to be considered happening on top of each other. So the DEQ really needs to take that into account. FERC needs to take that into account. And unfortunately, one of the things that these agencies do a lot of the time is they heavily segment these commenting processes so that it appears as if all these things are separate from each other. So we need to get in there and raise those issues ourselves so that, you know, maybe down the line, if some of our friends who fight in the legal arena need to point those out to those agencies. So we're talking about possible water impacts in Virginia, in North Carolina. We're talking about cumulative impacts of both these projects being built basically right on top of each other. And that's not even to mention the cumulative climate impacts that might result from both of these projects being built. So let's see here. At the risk of rambling here, I might move to the next slide. I know a lot of this sounds very familiar to some of the folks who are joining us on the call, being directly impacted by the MVP project. Folks who might have cautionary tales for new folks signing up to make a comment with DEQ or FERC. Do folks have questions? Well, if there are no questions, I may kick it back to my colleague Jess. Or if I'm reading that right, we're going to move on to best commenting practices. How to make a good comment with the DEQ and FERC to get them to listen to you. It's
I can pick up that ping pong ball, Josh.
there you go.
Thank you very
Thank you, Claire.
much. Not a problem. Yeah, so we're going to go through a couple of slides of just some of the best general practices when you're writing these comments, and you know, laying it all out here for you. You definitely want to be relevant to the specific project that you're referring to. So for both of these, it'll be MVP Southgate. So at least you have that one direction to focus towards. And then you also want to be specific and relevant to the permit and the process. So, you know, for the environmental assessment, as Leif went through, that's going to be environmental impacts. And of course, as we know, environmental impacts also our community impact. So, ways that you can weave that together. And then for the 401, that's going to be more water related impacts, which are, yes, environmental, but you want to narrow that scope of focus a little bit. So just be mindful of what process that you're referring to when you're writing these comments, and keep it clear in your head. And then you also want to make it relevant to the location. So we're talking about specific places in North Carolina where these projects are going to be most directly impacting the environment and the water. You want to connect to your own experience and knowledge, especially, as a resident. Weave in your life experience and just kind of general, organization and clarity of thought. You just want to have coherency, refrain from insults, don't be rude. Just make it something that someone would want to read. Yeah, good rule of thumb, good practice. A couple other things quickly that we've already touched on are clear asks. So statements, we're asking FERC to deny MVP Southgate's amendment request. And then for the DEQ, that you're asking to deny the VWP permit. Highlighting impacts to your community are very powerful. And then, as Josh so eloquently put it, the cumulative impacts that they will not put together themselves, that we need to keep highlighting in front of them to know that, hey, we're not gonna let go of this because it's real. Next slide, please. And just a couple of more specific tips, things helpful to include, a little more about, who you are. What does that mean? Well, are you a landowner? Are you a nearby community member? Are you a recreationalist? Do you go out and fish and enjoy the natural resources and waters that might be impacted by these projects? Those are good things to mention, as well as why it's important to you, why this land, the waters deserve to be protected. Any specific concerns or impacts that you know of that you can also derive from the talking points and from the docs that we've shared. Weave those in just to add some specificity to it. And then again, the direct ask, denying the permit, denying the amendment is what we're really going for with these comments. And then with that, I get to pass it off to Russell for the good old how-to in the FERC process. Take it away.
Thank you, Claire. For folks who may be unfamiliar with this complicated and I believe intentionally dense and difficult to navigate FERC process, we're going to kind of slowly go step by step through how to submit your comment tonight. And we will also share in the chat and via email after the presentation more step-by-step guide for sending comments later, or sharing those resources with people in your group so that they can also submit comments. So I'll try to take this as carefully as I can, but there will be detailed follow-up resources for you to use as well. If we can pop over to the next slide. And you see the cute little animated arrow is pointing to the bottom left of the screen at FERC Online. Once you get to this FERC.gov website, on that left side menu, you will select FERC Online, and that's going to open up a new section of the website where you'll actually be able to find the docket that we're looking for and begin the process of entering your information, drafting, and submitting your comment. And that should be up on the next slide. Well, I skipped a step. So once you've selected FERC Online, it's going to open up this menu. And I think the most accessible way for most folks to send in a comment on any project that FERC has governance over is to use e-comment. In some of the other items there in the menu, you see things like e-filing, e-subscription, all valuable resources, but for tonight and for most people's usage, we're going to focus on e-comment. And if you click that link, then it will open up the next window. On the next slide, thank you. And you're going to need to enter in some personal information here. And this kind of comes back to the best practices part of our presentation. If you're making threats against public officials or pipeline builders or anybody else, it's going to be captured in a public docket and likely be disregarded as well. So that's why we don't recommend that people, make it personal by way of attacks, but certainly you can make your comments personal in the nature of the things that you care about, the harm you're trying to prevent, and all of those things. So in these text fields here, you're going to complete all of this information, fill in an email address, enter in the CAPTCHA code below, and click authorize. And once you have basically kind of created a temporary account there, it's going to open up a text field for you to actually start drafting your comment and entering that information in. Or if you've done a little bit of preparation beforehand, which we recommend, typing it into a Word document or some other word processing software and copying and pasting that so that you don't run into technical issues, which is fairly frequent with FERC's website. So if we pop over to the next slide, you will see what that text box looks like. So key things here on this screen is you want to search by the docket number. We're focused on MVP Southgate for this presentation, which is CP 25-60. You will hit the search button there, and it's going to find that docket for you. You then need to select that item by clicking the little blue plus sign that the cute little red arrow is pointing to. In the text box below is where you can copy and paste the materials that you've already written, or if you're somebody that just likes to write directly into that and take your chances with the technology, you can certainly do that. Or if you're just submitting a simple, short and sweet comment, I want you to deny this certificate amendment for this project. Here are my reasons why I'm a directly impacted person, or I've witnessed all of the harm from the MVP mainline and those kinds of things, and just brain dump that all in there. Then you will enter that in and click send comment, which is somewhat hard to see, but is visible in the bottom left side of the screen. And I will add that we're sharing some resources out in the chat, and I'm going to pop my email in there as well, and we'll include that in the follow-up materials, because if you get jammed up, or FERC is just confusing and obnoxious and you want a little bit more hands-on help, always happy to do that, especially for directly impacted folks. And I think that takes us through to writing our comments. So let's go and do that. How much time are we giving ourselves for this part? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. We're all going to get onto FERC online, write a quick comment opposing MVP Southgate certificate amendment, and we'll regroup back here in this space in 5 minutes. Okay. If you are still writing, still submitting, still grappling with the FERC website, that is fine. Take all of the time that you need. We're gonna shift gears here in a second, and I will pass it back to Jess to talk about what's happening with the Virginia DEQ. Go ahead, Jess.
Thanks so much. The second way that you can take action, so, if you're writing an e-comment tonight to FERC, that's great. You can sign the petition to FERC if you want a quicker share. But you can also send a comment directly to the Virginia DEQ asking them to deny the Virginia Water Protection Permit. And so we will have a couple minutes here if folks want to take that second action before we go over sort of all the tools from tonight. But that's writing an email to a designated email address, which you would find in page 2 of the toolkit, for which you'll receive a link. And when this video is posted online, will be in the comments of the video. On that second page of the document, it shows you where to submit it, what you need to include in it in terms of your name and address, remind you of the deadline, and then what you need to have in your subject of the email, which is referencing the Virginia Water Protection Permit and the application number. We also have some talking points that are specific to Virginia waterways and Virginia impacts within that section of the toolkit. So everything you need is in both places. We'll take a moment now to finish out your FERC comments or send a quick email to the DEQ point of contact email that they have for this comment period. We'll take just another 4 minutes, and then we're going to reconvene to talk about what we've submitted, some suggestions for each other, and go again over our calls to action. So we'll be back in just 4 minutes. So again, the toolkit that you need for FERC or Virginia DEQ is within the chat and is linked below the recording of this video. We'll be back in just 4 minutes. And we've got just another minute until we're going to wrap up our live writing and come together again. We'll go ahead and come back together now. So I'm going to pass it to Samantha.
Thanks, Jess. My name is Samantha. I'm also here with Appalachian Voices. Hope y'all all had some time to get everything submitted successfully. I know I did. But anybody want to share some of the things that they wrote in their comment? Or this is also a great time if there are any questions, either technical or otherwise, that you want to ask. Please feel free to drop it in the chat. Also, if you'll scroll down at the bottom of the screen there's that little heart react that allows you to raise your hand too, and we can take you off mute to see if we want to go over anything.
Samantha, I'll share what I submitted to FERC, which was a request to extend the public comment period by an additional 30 days to increase the opportunity for more meaningful public involvement and have it overlap with the SSEP's environmental assessment.
I can share too. I'm getting through it. I tend to be a little wordy, so but I'm about it to the ask. But I was just weaving in a little bit of my personal story, being someone who's grown up, pretty much been in the state my whole life, and seeing how development and growth have far-reaching impacts, and then also highlighting the cumulative impacts of the proposed projects, as well as what we talked about, the co-location of SSEP and Southgate. And then my next things before I submit will be asking to deny the amendment and also putting an ask in to extend the comment period, just as Jess did.
Awesome. I also talked a little bit about my personal experience. Folks that I care about are going to be directly affected by this, but also having seen the expansion and outgrowth of these lines throughout other states, North Carolina, Alabama, and just asking them to deny this entire project and value some of our natural resources, our health, and our long-term commitment to more sustainable energy sources, as opposed to the sort of overbuilding that's been due to some overprojection of utility. Again, these are going to be short-term solutions that are going to have a long-term effect directly to the people who are not getting any of the benefit. And so I'm hoping that they will deny that and prioritize protecting our health and our natural resources, including water, soil, and wildlife. Also, let us know if anybody's having any trouble with the process. Understandable, it's not the most intuitive, but this would be a great time to let any of these folks kind of walk through that with you if you are having trouble with any of these submissions. I'm going to leave it here for a minute or two, but for folks who are watching after the fact, please feel free to use any of the toolkits that have been provided and reach out to any contacts. Again, we'd be happy to help. But just for another minute or so, we'll leave it here in case any questions or some shares want to raise their hand or drop something in the chat, and then we'll move on. I see your hand, Joshua.
Yeah, I might drop a little bit in the chat here. These days, like to kind of ice the cake with this one. May not have been said by our friends at EQT or the joint venture project that is Mountain Valley Pipeline, but words that did come out of the mouths of someone at Williams Company regarding the impacts of the project are always good to, they're a good reminder for anyone who is maybe at risk of being swayed by the economic promises of these kinds of projects. So yeah, it reads, the benefits of the project are not realized by those who are impacted. Instead, the impacts are borne by those whose properties are impacted, and benefits are seen by those outside the project area. Therefore, the risk is that impacted areas are not swayed by economic benefits, including jobs, additional natural gas, and very limited tax revenues. Now, this would be difficult to believe if you've been to any recent SSEP 401 hearings in Virginia or North Carolina, where the Chamber of Commerce types and other industry stooges come in to talk a lot about tax revenue and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, just a good little asterisk to add there. As a reminder that Williams Company chose to share with FERC at one point.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's frustrating that they absolutely know that this is not going to benefit folks who are most directly impacted and are continuing to allow that misinformation to be spread regardless, even though we know that is not going to be the case. We're going to hang out here for just a few more seconds, and then we're going to share some links where y'all can have a few further actions. Alrighty, so there are a few other things in addition to commenting through this eDoc that we can talk about today. So we've got 2 QR codes here. The first one, which I'm about to drop in the chat right now, and you can also follow that QR code on your screen by pointing your camera at that. Well, if it will let me drop that. Sorry, that's super long. If somebody wants to edit that, totally fine. Make it a little shorter link. But this is a petition where you can tell FERC to stop the MVP Southgate. It's just going to give you just a few more things that you can do to reinforce some of what we were doing here today. But it will take you to our action site where you can add your name, you can kind of fill in your contact information and add additional comments, and we can send that through later on as well. If you would like to follow through and just again, add there. Thank you, Jess. That's a much more elegant link. Ways that you can follow up on this, reiterate some of what we were talking about today, and just kind of strengthen that record of dissent from people who are going to be affected by these pipelines. And there's another way, if you would like to actually show up in person, see some of this process yourself. There is going to be a Virginia DEQ hearing that you can actually visit. That's going to be coming up on November the 20th. And that's going to be our second QR code here where you can sign up for that, get notifications. Having a comment on record is great, but you can also have one recorded in person, see the DEQ, meet some other folks. It's not scary. I've done it myself a few times at other hearings. Usually they'll give you about 3 minutes. You arrive a little bit early, you'll have a sign-up sheet that you can put your name on. Some folks write their comment ahead of time and just read off that sheet. Some folks just talk from the heart. As long, again, as you are just speaking to your personal experience, speaking to the impact, what you believe, and asking them to deny that, and not using, again, the abusive language, it's totally fine. And I absolutely encourage folks to show up in some of the person hearings if you can. Again, it's just a great opportunity to get your impact, your dissent, and just the public record showing that we, the folks, don't want this to continue through and understand the negative impact it's going to have on these communities and our natural resources.
All right, thanks, Samantha. And we've got a bonus call to action too. Just as MVP Southgate is trying to attain Section 401 permit from Virginia currently, and I almost misspoke because there's so many things happening right now that I find myself correcting myself constantly. MVP Southgate is trying to get this 401 permit in Virginia. Well, so is SSEP. And last week there were 2 hearings in Danville concerning those proposed permits. So if you'd like to add your voice in that comment period as well, and weren't able to make the hearings or maybe haven't been able to sign a petition yet, head to the link there where the QR code is located. Also, all of these links and related materials that we've been referencing this evening, we're going to be sending you in a follow-up and sharing with our lists and networks here for our respective organizations with App Voices and ARTivism POWHR and 7 Directions. So I think we're coming more or less to a close for our 401 in Virginia and for environmental assessment comment duties tonight. And I'd like to send a special note of thanks to everyone on the screen here, as well as everyone who's tuned in from home. Some familiar faces in there. So thanks everyone for showing up and helping us transmit many truths to these regulators so they can make a truthful and honest and responsible decision on these permits. And yeah, well, as I said earlier, we'll be following up with everyone who registered and making these resources available to anyone who may be wanting to participate in this process too. So if you have friends or family that weren't able to make it tonight or may not be able to make it to the hearing for Southgate on November 20th, then this is going to be right up their alley. So I think we're going to call it a close for the evening. And thanks to everyone at in the coalition here, coalition partners, Russell, Samantha, Claire, Leaf, Jess, and the rest of all the teams that helped put this presentation together and keep folks showing up. We're going to keep fighting them.